What's going on, everybody? It's RoyalYGL, and welcome back to another episode of Sleeper Sunday. Sleeper Sunday, for those of you that don't know, is a series I came up with showcasing fun hidden decks you may not know about that can deal quite a bit of damage in the proper hands. We'll be going over a basic deck list, strengths, weaknesses, what can be done to make the deck better, and of course, a few replays to see the deck in action. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the winner of this month's poll, Nemleria. So Nemleria is an archetype revolving around this singular sleepy pendulum gal, and all of the weird random creatures that her imagination comes up with, being large bodies that you place on board while she spends most of her time napping in the extra deck. They released in Cyberstorm Access in May of 2023, with their most recent support actually released being out of Duelist Nexus in the same year, though they do have one card coming out of Age of Overlord in, I believe it is October. You want to be my co-host? They also have no extra deck monsters, and just about every monster in the main deck is a boss monster to its own extent. Alright, everybody say goodbye to my cat, she's being a nuisance. So to start off, let's talk about the sleepy gal herself, Dreaming Nemleria. Dreaming Nemleria is a level 1 fairy light pendulum with 0 attack and 1500 defense, with a pendulum effect that reads once per turn during your main phase. You can place one Nemleria continuous spell from your deck or graveyard face up on your field, and if you do, add this card to your extra deck face up, but you cannot special summon her the turn that you activate this effect. Her monster effect says she cannot be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from your face up extra deck by having no cards in your extra deck except herself, and you can only special summon her once per turn. On summon, for every 3 of your face down banished cards, period, you can banish up to 1 card from your opponent's field and or graveyard face down, then shuffle 1 of your banished cards into the deck for each of the cards you banish off of this effect. So basically, what you're looking at is like the epitome of a glass cannon. She doesn't do anything else, and her summoning condition seems like it can be a bit of an asshole at times, but when she hits the board, she is completely wiping everything. To top it off, it's face down banishing too, so most decks aren't going to be able to have a way to recover that, and this can be really good considering that this deck is typically played as a blind second OTK deck. What does suck though is that for her pendulum effect, it is by far the easiest way to put her into the extra deck, but you can't special summon her the same turn, which is really rough. It's not even like it's this one copy, you just can't special summon Dreaming Nemleria the entire turn. They also only have one continuous spell, by the way, and we'll get into that when we get into the spell section. But yeah, if you probably couldn't tell, like I mentioned earlier, she basically spends almost her entire time in the extra deck except for when she occasionally hits the board, only to go typically back into the extra deck by either linking her off or using the effect of their Rhoda spell, which again we'll mention later, because almost every single other card in the deck revolves around having her face up in the extra deck. And I'm actually going to do a little bit of rearranging here because it would make a lot more sense in the explanation part of things if I put these in a different order. Next up are the 2 monsters that came along with her when she first was revealed, being Nemleria Dream Defender O'Reiler and Nemleria Dream Defender Coette. I'm pretty sure these are French, by the way, so forgive me. Both are level 10 light beast monsters, with O'Reiler having 2500 attack and 2000 defense, and Coette having the opposite. And they both say if you have a face-up pendulum monster in your extra deck, you can special summon this card from your hand. It is an inherent summon, but you can only special summon like this once per turn that way. O'Reiler says if you have Dreaming Nemleria face up in your extra deck quick effect, you can banish 1 face down card from your extra deck face down to make him gain 500 attack for each monster your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn, and Coette will negate the activation of an effect that will target one of your Nemleria cards. They're both fairly simple overall, and they were part of the very first wave, which is why a lot of people figured the deck was just going to be completely mediocre, but they are pretty large level 10 bodies, especially the O'Reiler, which can get really big depending on how many monsters your opponent has, and of course they do synergize really well with the continuous spell that again we'll get to later, because a lot of the deck revolves around having level 10 beast monsters. Their other level 10 beasts came out a little bit later, being Nemleria Dream Devourer Reveal. I believe this came out in the second wave of support, and it says if this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can banish 3 cards from your extra deck face down except Dreaming Nemleria to special summon this card, but you cannot special summon from the extra deck the turn you activate this effect except pendulum monsters. And you can send one other level 10 beast monster from your hand or face up field to the graveyard to set 1 Nemleria trap directly from your deck, and you can only use each effect of this card once per turn. So Reveal basically takes the restriction of O'Reiler and Coette requiring you to have the thing in the extra deck and just completely ignores it, allowing you to continue your game plan by banishing cards from your extra deck, which is a thing that the deck really wants to do, of course, with the Nemleria, to get a free level 10 big body on board. And it also fetches one of your traps, and the traps are very important when going first for this deck, even if it is a blind second deck. And Reveal ends up being one of the better cards in the deck that you could actually open, especially because it can also summon itself from grave, even if it is going to get banished a lot of the time. The final Nemleria monster is your most recent one, except for the stuff out of Age of Overlord, of course. Dreaming Reality of Nemleria Realized, who had a much longer name beforehand. She's actually a light fairy with 1500 attack and 3000 defense, and she says she gains 100 attack, for each face-down card in your extra deck, meaning she'll get weaker the more you actually continue your game plan. You can only use each of her following effects once per turn. If she's in your hand, you can target one monster you control for cost, place it on the bottom of the deck, and if you do special summon this card, and if she's special summoned, you can activate one of these effects. Either add one Dreaming Nemleria from your deck to your face-up extra deck, change one other face-up monster on the field to face-down defense position. So, Dreaming Nemleria, or Realized, or Dreaming Reality of Nemleria, Realized, whatever you want to call her, I usually just call her Realized, is a bit of an interesting card, because she actually has a really good summoning condition if you can actually get a body on board, like one of the non-Nemleria monsters that we'll get to in just a moment, because it's not really too steep of a cost most of the time, though it can end up being a little bit annoying. I kind of wish it sent to the grave or bounced it or something instead, but the actual on-summon effect is where this card really comes in handy, because the first effect, while you usually are going to have Nemleria already in your extra deck by the time you do this, because you'll probably open her and then use her effect to place her there, if you send her off of this effect, you can actually special summon her the same turn that she was sent there, if you banish all of the other things from your extra deck, such as off the effect of Eater of Millions or something. But the second effect is really good, not just for when you go second and want to get rid of a nuisance card, but it's also good off of one of the traps that basically just specials one from hand or deck, I'll just say that right now. And so you can summon her on the opponent's turn for a disruption, and it doesn't target either, which makes it really good for outing other problems that can't be targeted, you know. The main con about Realize, though, is that she is a fairy and not a beast, so you don't actually have too many ways to search her, aside from the Rhoda spell that we'll talk about. That is it for the Nemleria monsters. On to the non-Nemlerias, of course. We have 3 Grand Maju to Aiza. Again, this is a blind second deck that likes to banish a lot of cards, and so you're going to have a very beefy Grand Maju most of the time, which is really funny in case they stop all your Nemleria plays, and then you just normal summon the Grand Maju and like beat the shit out of them. We're also playing 2 Gizmek Orochi, really good to use on your opponent's end phase to bring it out and get a bunch of banishes off the top of your deck, and then on your turn you can board break while getting rid of cards from your extra deck as well, something that I wish Nemleria itself actually did, but I mean, I guess you can't really complain that much. And then of course 2 copies of Eater of Millions. How are we going to complain about the card that can get rid of your entire extra deck immediately? That is it for the regular monsters in the deck. We are playing a bunch of really big blowout hand traps, 3 copies of Dimension Shifter because you don't really care about your stuff getting banished, in fact you want it to get banished, Nib in case you want to get an extra easy board break because this deck actually can't play through disruptions too well. 3 Ash and 3 Imperm as well, because you can open these alongside like your Dreaming Nemleria and some of your other monsters to make it a lot easier. We're also playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Not only are you banishing cards from your extra deck face down, which is what the deck wants to do, but you're also drawing 2 cards in the process, which can help dig for things like the Dreaming Nemleria or the monsters that you want to see in your hand. Onto the Nemleria back row though, we have 3 copies of Sweet Dreams Nemleria. Simply says add a Nemleria monster from your deck to your hand, and then if you already have the Dreaming Nemleria face up in your extra deck, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects this turn when a Nemleria monster is normal or special summon. You can also place it from the graveyard onto the bottom of your deck, then target one Dreaming Nemleria you control and add it to the extra deck face up. You can only activate one of it per turn. So this is pretty simple, I mean it's a Rhoda, but the cool thing is for the second effect is that Dreaming Nemleria has no way of putting yourself natively back into the extra deck, and a lot of the time you're going to be locking yourself into Pendulums, meaning you can't go into something like Relinquished Anima that easily. And so you can just use this to place her back into the extra deck because she has 0 attack, so she's not doing anything on the board really, and it turns all of your effects alive again. Not to mention that instead of banishing itself from grave or anything, you're placing it back on the bottom so you can have it back to search for later. Onto the continuous spell that I mentioned earlier, this is Dream Tower of Princess Nemleria. It says you can banish 2 face down cards from your extra deck face down to add 2 level 10 beast monsters with different names from your deck to your hand, but you cannot special summon from the extra deck except Pendulum monsters the turn you activate this effect, and you can only use this effect once per turn. Also, if a Nemleria monster you control be destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect while you have Dreaming face up in your extra deck, you can banish a face down card from your extra deck face down instead. This card is really good for the deck because it's basically like every turn you're just getting 2 free monsters from your deck, essentially getting rid of stuff in your extra deck at the same time. You can place it immediately from your deck off Dreaming Nemleria, so it turns on all of your stuff, such as grabbing your Reveal to search for a trap. And also the protection is just really nice as well, especially when you are forced to go first, because it can make your opponent have a really hard time actually trying to out your stuff, especially in combination with O'Reiler ending up being really big off of his effect. And they do have 2 trap cards, both of which we're playing 1 each. Starting with Nemleria Louvre, it says special summon a Nemleria monster or a level 10 beast monster from your hand or deck in defense position, but return it to the hand during the end phase. And you can banish it from your graveyard, then target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, and it loses 100 attack and defense for each of your currently face-down banished cards TAPIOCARDS until the end of this turn, which you can only use each effect of this card once per turn. Ignoring how gross this artwork is, I did not need to see this weird goat thing coughing up icing. This card is pretty good. If you already have the other one off of your Reveal effect to search, then you can go for this one to get a free realized from your deck on your opponent's turn. Really good at booking an opponent's monster and then adding it back to the hand during your end phase, or during the end phase, sorry. So you can actually summon it back on the opponent's turn, or not on the opponent's turn, sorry, on your turn to get the effect again to book a monster, or you can dump Dreaming Nemleria from your deck. And then the second Prank Kids Plan effect doesn't really always come up, but it can come up because it is an OTK deck, and so it can make an opponent's monster that is otherwise too beefy a lot easier for something like O'Reilly to be over. And then finally, we have Nemleria Repet. This is where the deck can actually successfully go first most of the time, because it is a continuous trap that says if you control another Nemleria card, you can banish up to 3 cards from your extra deck to apply the appropriate effect, except Dreaming Nemleria. If you banish 1, you add a Nemleria card from your graveyard to your hand. 2 says any damage you take this turn is halved. Or 3, send 1 level 10 beast monster you control to the graveyard, and if you do, negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn. You can only use this effect once per turn. Personally, I don't think you can pass up a free skill drain just by sending a beast you control to the graveyard, especially considering that most of the time it's going to be Reveal, because Reveal is the one that searches this card, so you can summon the Reveal back from the graveyard on your turn next. Or honestly, I've actually used these first and second effect a lot just to get things out of my extra deck in order to make Dreaming Nemleria live, because you can use the effects during your main phase as well, or during your turn period, I guess I should say. So you can add back something like a like an O'Reilly or whatever that you sent off of Reveal's effect to your hand on your turn, summon back the Reveal from your graveyard as well, and then that'll thin out your extra deck to make Dreaming Nemleria live potentially. And none of this locks you into Pendulum, so literally you can go Reveal effect, send an O'Reilly or a Coet, and then on your turn again, summon the Reveal back from your graveyard and special summon the O'Reilly or Coet from your hand. And then not only can you poke directly with those most of the time, but you can also go into something like a Gustav Max, or you can just use them straight up to go into something like a Libe. You can go into the Galaxy Destroyer, which is really good if you're in a back row matchup. You can do a lot of stuff off of just using the Repet, even if this deck is a going second deck. And that does it for the main deck. Onto the extra deck, 99.9% of this stuff really does not matter, because you're locked out of the extra deck more often than not anyways, because a lot of the time you want to end the game in like one turn, right? But if you go first, on turn 3, there's actually a lot of options you can go into. For example, Relinquished Anima is a really good way to put Dreaming Nemleria back into your extra deck after using her effect. To be fair, there's probably not much you're going to be left to steal, because you're just going to get rid of it with the Dreaming Nemleria. But just in the off chance that there is, like, you know, maybe there's something protecting or so, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's just a way to put her back into the extra deck in case you need to make O'Reilly or Coet summon live. And then the rest of the stuff is literally just a bunch of random miscellaneous stuff. You know, you got Utopic Dark Infinity, Super Dimensional Robot Galaxy Destroyer, Sky Palace Gangara Die, Dora, 2 Gustav, because Gustav's actually pretty important for going for game, Libe, Tarantula, 7 Sins, Hope Harbinger to make off of the Gizmek Orochi, Samudra Glubion, and like the Numeron Dragon package here. And then, of course, Zeus, in case you do swing with something like a Libe and you end up not being able to kill. Onto the stuff that you could play, or like you don't play or whatever anymore, something like that. We actually are playing every single Nemleria card. I think this is the first time we're actually playing every card from an archetype. So just stuff that I have played before or have considered. Desires was actually in the same list that I ended up referencing for this, which I'll try to link down in the description. I have it in the testing video that I ended up doing, or the testing stream. But Desires was actually in the same list as Extrav here, which you may already think it's like, oh, why would you do that? You know, they turn each other off or whatever. You can't activate one in the same turn as the other. And that is a big factor of it. But another reason I cut Desires, because like you could use it after you get like your Extrav Ash or whatever after you start off with it. The biggest reason I cut it was because I kept losing really important cards. Like losing your traps and not having a target for Reveal, losing your continuous spells is especially bad when you have Dreaming Nemleria in your hand. And also, I've actually lost all copies of Dreaming off of just activating 1 Desires, and it was literally agony. Like I had to scoop right up and right then and there, because without at least 1 copy of Dreaming, you're basically screwed. So it's basically like choosing between Extrav and Desires, and honestly, Extrav was just a lot better because I don't have to risk losing stuff in my main deck that's important, and it also benefits me by banishing stuff from my extra deck to make Dreaming live faster. You could also play one of each of the Nightmares in case you really wanted to, because those are things that you can probably go into a bit easier, but I mean, again, like, you really don't use your extra deck very much at all. And then Lightning Storm, which I should have put back over here, is just another good board breaker that you can have that doesn't prevent you from doing damage or prevent your battle phase. That is going to do it for the deck list, though. Again, I will put the one that I reference in the description down below in case you want to go check it out. It isn't in English, though, as a heads up. I kind of just looked at what he placed down. Before we get into the replays, though, a quick word from our sponsor, TAPIOCARDS. Are you tired of lugging around a real rock every time you want to think about your favorite hand trap? Well, now you can show off your love for alien meteors in style with your very own TAPIOCARDS NIBIRU keychain. Their keychains are made out of high-quality, durable rubber that you can hang from just about anything. Keys, bags, make a necklace out of it or something, I don't know. And you can get one of these wonderful NIBIRU keychains for absolutely free. For your chance to win, simply like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, follow both myself and TAPIOCARDS over on Twitter, link in the description of course, and comment down below the weirdest dream you can remember having, along with the hashtag #HowManySummons. Even if you don't win the giveaway, you can still get this NIBIRU and other awesome TCG accessories and merch over on tapiocards.com, and if you use code Aurora5, you can get 5% off your purchase while also supporting me financially so I can continue to bring you awesome Yu-Gi-Oh content. With that out of the way though, let's get right into some replays. Alright, that's going to do it for the replays that I got, or at least some of them. I actually have more if you want to check out the full and entire unedited VOD up on the channel where I did some Nemleria testing on stream. It was super fun, even though it was a bit short. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into the strengths of the deck. So Dimension Shifter, of course, is always one hell of a card. It single-handedly lets you get the upper hand against a lot of decks, despite your lack of immediate removal or disruption going first or second. Synergy with cards like Gren Maju, Eater of Millions, Gizmek Orochi, etc. give you an entire separate portion of your deck that can at least allow you to function should your Nemleria cards end up fumbling or get completely disrupted, which can happen a decent amount given the fact that Dreaming Nemleria has to be in your extra deck most of the time, which we'll talk about a bit more when we get into the weaknesses. And finally, Dreaming's effect is absolutely insane when it goes off. As you can see, both having Mass Field and Graveyard non-targeting, face-down banishing removal, and recovering your extra deck resources to make your effects live again is huge, especially in combination with the big bodies to push for game when the field is open. But of course, as always, every time there's a strength, there must be a weakness, starting with the fact that while there are effects to put her directly into the extra deck or to get her more consistently, the entire deck crumbles if you can't get Dreaming into your extra deck. Oriler and Coet will literally sit there and clog up your hand and even realize since you can't get a body on board for the summon of it unless you use something like a Gren Maju, Eater of Millions, etc. Also, a lot of the effects on the main cards are pretty underwhelming. Oriler simply getting bigger only helps to beat over big monsters, and Coet's protection is a bit too specific. Even Realize Singular Book just doesn't really feel like it does enough against a lot of decks anymore. Speaking of, even with Repet and or Louvre, the deck just doesn't really set up enough disruption going first. This of course is kind of to be expected from a blind second deck, but not being able to access the extra deck at all going first kind of just shuts off a lot of toolbox cards that you could otherwise go into with the deck, especially in the rank 10 category, which I think is a really cool pool. Finally, for a deck that's clearly meant to go second, it has a severe lack of in-theme board breaking. Yes, Dreaming's effect is absolutely insane, but going second, it's very hard to actually bring her out without locking you from her with her first effect. Otherwise, opening her and Eater of Millions would actually be really cool, but unfortunately we can't seem to have nice things. The only way to bypass this is to dump her off of Realize instead of using her own effect, but because Realize isn't accessible off of the continuous spell since she's a fairy not a beast, it makes her a lot less searchable, so it's a lot clunkier to try and pull off. So how are we making Nemleria better? Well, I think more ways to dump Dreaming from deck would be much appreciated. Something like future monsters having an effect like maybe a pop, like I mentioned, like Gizmek Orochi, followed by dumping her on Resolution would be fantastic. And of course, this in turn means more monsters with alternate summoning conditions would also be really nice. Reveal was absolutely perfect. Banishing 3 monsters from your extra deck not only furthers your end goal of removing stuff from your extra deck, but also means you don't have to rely on having the Dreaming Nemleria in your extra deck. And of course, more disruption would be really appreciated as well. Repet is really cool, but searching it means you're only getting access to it and not something like Louvre, and so making you have to choose between the Mass Skill Drain or the Quick Effect Book non-targeting, it's really annoying. As I mentioned, a monster like Gizmek Orochi with a Quick Effect to pop by banishing stuff from your extra deck would be fantastic, and even a little would go a long way. Like, this would really help with the in-theme board breaking issue. Also, another continuous spell target for Dreaming's Pendulum effect would be much appreciated. Opening it and the Dreaming Tower is just really annoying, because it means you essentially just have a soft Garnet in your hand. It doesn't even have to have a super crazy effect, like maybe a slow board breaking effect on your turn or some recovery. Finally, this one is a bit of a stretch and mostly there to be funny, but hear me out. Give them a rank 10 Pendulum Xyz that they can go into under the lock. What would it do? No idea, just give them one, I don't know, it'd be kind of funny. But with all of that out of the way, I'm not sure if there's anything else I can really say about Nemleria. I think that there's definitely like the veil of a competent deck here. It just has a lot of like really annoying and kind of just boring issues, mainly just Oriler and Coet really not being very good. Like, you're kind of relying on Reveal and Realize to just hard carry the deck on their backs, and so more stuff along the lines of them and not Oriler and Coet would just be really appreciated. Let us drop these down to one-ofs just so you can search them for more things, just please, Konami. I think there's definitely something to work with here, and it can be a really fun blind second deck, but it just needs a lot more TLC compared to like some other decks we've covered on the series. But I don't know, that's just my opinion. Let me know yours down in the comments below, because that's actually going to do it for the episode. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as I'll split this video and the channel into recommended. And if you like this content and you want to like it, like the rest of my Sleeper Sunday series, then perhaps consider subscribing, because we're going to 5,000 subscribers by the end of 2023. We're approaching that goal really fast, by the way. Not to mention, it supports the channel more than anything else, and it's absolutely free. And of course, as always, I will be posting a poll in my community tab at the end of every month to choose the next deck for Sleeper Sunday, but it won't be up for more than 24 hours most of the time, so be sure that you pick something while you can. Also, I don't really mention this all the time, but if you are a tier 2 patron, you can actually give me suggestions on the decks to actually use for Sleeper Sunday. Of course, this doesn't mean that deck will get picked, but it will be chosen as an option for a poll. But also, if you want to support me directly while getting some awesome TCG merchandise in the process, check out our sponsor TAPIOCARDS, link in the description down below. Use code Aurora5 for 5% off your purchase at checkout and support me financially, and be sure to enter that giveaway as well. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.